Okay, so just starting to turn, but just build it up gently. And just remember what we're looking for. We're looking for the two muscles, the one that's tightening to do the action and the one that's being stretched the other side in order to support it. So there's always two muscles, at least. So one muscle is active and is tightening, and that stretches the muscle the other side to the point where it can't go any further, and then that one kicks in. So my turn to the left stimulates the muscle that's going to turn me to the right. So if you want to turn to the left, first turn to the right. It's like just kicking into the trampoline to get yourself bouncing. And you just keep going until those muscles just become taut, till there's a tight tone to them. So they're sort of knitted together. They're part of a unity. And we just want to be mindful of the two stages to practicing an exercise. So the first stage is using your consciousness to establish it, to start it going, making sure it's all okay, watching it carefully. And then the second stage is actually practicing it, is just forgetting all of that and just sinking into the energy and almost letting it do you rather than you doing it. So it's important to get to that stage. Otherwise, you're not working on energy. You're just working on some sort of fitness or whatever. So what's important is that when it slips into that second stage, so when you no longer need to concentrate on it, that you don't instead start thinking about something else. If you do that, then you won't get into energy either. So it's just being able to just quieten the mind, just close your eyes and just sink into it and just feel the movement. Okay. And now the next one, just tipping from side to side. And again, just gently. So just imagine there's no gravity. So I have to use the muscle to pull myself down here. And that stretches the muscle the other side. And then that one can kick in. So the two muscles either side are a tightly bound unity. It's really just one thing, and one side tightens and then the other side tightens. And then to intensify it even more, you can just look up the stick when you tip to the side. This is what they do in yoga. So when they do these side bends, they turn the head to look up. Just makes it a little bit stronger. Always a good idea to turn the head when you're doing exercises that involve turning or tipping. Okay, so now let's just try the ones where we just tip forwards. So again, imagine there's no gravity, so you have to use the muscles in the belly to pull yourself into this shape. And then the muscles in the lower back kick in to straighten you back up. And then they contract even more to pull you backwards, as though you're going to bang your head against the wall or fall over. So really using the muscles in the belly here to support it. And then the muscles in the belly start working actively to move you and then pulling forwards. Yeah, so just feel the difference between using the muscle to support what the other muscle is doing, or using the muscle actively and forcing the muscle the other side to do the supporting. Ooh. and then back up. Okay, so now let's just press the stick up. So just pushing it up. And again, just imagine there's no gravity and it's quite stiff, doesn't really want to move. So now I've got to kick in with the belly muscles to start this downward motion. So belly pulls, the arms continue the action. And then here again, I have to kick in with the back muscles. Yeah, so feel here, it's like you have to reach up a little bit higher to get on top of the stick so that you can pull it down. And then here, when it's right at the bottom, you have to somehow get underneath it in order to push it up. Yeah, so we need a little turn in the opposite direction first before we can turn back the other way. This is one of the things we're just looking at. So this is the end of my down. Now to get it up, I need to just get under it by going down a little bit more, and then I can push up. So this is the end of my up. And now to pull it down, I have to get on top of the stick because it's my top of my fingers that are going to pull it. So I go up into the tips of the fingers, and then I can pull down. And then here I have to get underneath the stick into the heel of my palm, and then I can push it up. And then and under. Yeah, so we just like to make it as physical as possible, but in this sort of rubbery. So you're sort of gripping the stick quite firmly, you're pulling it and twisting it. So there's a bit of a fight going on, like a tussle. So you just imagine that the medium that you're in, the air, is getting thicker and thicker. It's more and more difficult to do this. It doesn't get easier. It gets more difficult because it just gets more real. So okay. And now let's just try a few of these where we just take it over the head, just opening the shoulders. Ooh. It's great. So really opening up inside to get it over the top. Yeah, so if something in me can just really make the spine erect and really open, then it will slot over the top easily. Okay. Okay, so now let's try the one where we pull and push the stick. So in a sense, this one's the most important. because we can use this one to sort of extend the breath to make the, more air comes in and more goes out. So as you pull this, so now I'm trying to stretch the stick. I'm pulling my two hands away from each other. And just breathe in. And then pushing the stick, squashing the stick, and now breathing out. And pulling. And pushing. Pulling. And pushing. One more pulling. And one more pushing. Great. And now let's just finish with just leaning back on the cushion and just pedaling. So you can put the hands behind you. So it's just trying to get the legs used to just being, the feet used to being off the ground for a while. And just moving them around. So we want the legs to have enough strength for us to be able to move them around. So not just a strength that supports me, but a strength, a really active strength, a delicate, active strength. So with my students, we get two people on the floor, feet touching, and they're basically pedaling into each other. Okay. Okay, so shall we stand up? So let's just move side to side. So just activating the feet. The foot that empties extends the toes, and then the toes grip in order to pull me into it. So we want to just feel the little toe and the one next to it really reaching. So they sort of reach more than the other ones really, because they're outside, they're on the outside, if you like. Yeah, so we're just trying to activate the spirit. So everything that we do really is for spirit and against ego. So our posture, the pulled in belly, the rounded out min meng, it's all to do with spirit. It gets us configured in such a way that spirit is available to us. So if you think of like early man, when before we were really sort of Homo sapiens, so they just lived in like small family groups. Tribes hadn't established themselves yet, and they were nomadic, so they would have moved around. And they would have had a very different relationship to the world, to their world, than we have to ours. So they would have been totally spirited, because they would have had to be, otherwise they'd be dead. So, they would have, their own spirit would have been really lively to give them this sort of speed and this sort of reaching into the future, sort of, so that they have a sense of what's, any sort of, anything that's going to befall them. And that part of the brain that just sees the bigger picture would have been very much the dominant part. And the other part of the brain would only have kicked in when they were like with each other around the campfire, eating their food or whatever. So they didn't have egos. They had no sense of like this, what they call conscious interiority. They had no sense of self. They were just there in nature. They were just part of nature. So spirit sort of flits. It sort of, like the butterfly. So, it's here. You imagine that sort of nervous, that spirited nervousness that you would have to have. Just a sensitivity, really. So that's the way they were. They were just like a bundle of nerves. And that's the way they modeled their world. So their world was basically also a bundle of nerves, a bundle of connections. And then when we became clever enough to tame nature, kill off anything that could actually eat us and domesticate it, then that allowed the ego to develop. And then we modeled the world on that. So that's when we got monotheism, the one ego, the one God. So just feel the toes, that my toes really spread open. And it's got this sense that they're just growing and growing, and then they can curl into the ground. So you just want to feel, because you've got to intend that with your mind. You've got to mean it. So how do you use your mind to intend? You don't just see it. You make it happen. So, and then I clutch. Okay. So now let's just bring it back to riding horse. So just establishing our posture. So our posture is turning the body into a cave. So the arms reaching round, the legs reaching like this, the belly withdrawing to push the min meng back, a sense that the tail is coming under, not because I'm tightening it, but because the min meng is pushing backwards. And just a real sense of, when your hackles rise, when you get this sense that the hairs on the back of your neck are sort of springing up. It's got that sort of feeling when you're in the correct posture. Okay, now let's just breathe. So again, just trying to breathe more air in than you're used to, because it's that straightens the spine. You can sort of become familiar with each vertebra and just feel like it clicking. It clicks up the spine. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's like a ladder, the spine. It's got these rungs. We want to be able to get more air in and also be able to expel more. So just to extend the range of our breathing. Is the mind, the sort of bad mind, the ego, it sets up limits to everything. And we just want to extend beyond it as just a strategy for destabilizing it a little bit. And when you start that work of destabilizing the ego, that's when the shit really hits the fan. Just feel your feet on the ground. We just want to feel the earth differently. Just get away from that Newtonian model, which is very mechanical, this idea of gravity that's pulling me down. It's more like, or it feels more like to me, like the earth is just sending up these sort of shoots, this sort of like an ivy that's going through my feet and up my body and coiling around me. So it's very organic and very personal. And it really comes into the body. It's not just pulling me down as a thing. It's getting into me. So we're trying to adopt, the fascial model of the body. So the body is just this massive filaments of fascia. And that's the way we just then feel the world. So the world is also a mass of connections, a mass of filaments. And it's exactly how Castaneda talked about it. Yeah. So what gives me coherence is not my ego, is not my sense of self, but simply the fact that I'm in a body, and the body has its bound. The body is bounded by its skin, but the energy goes out a long way. Okay, so let's bring it back. Okay, so now let's just try this. So just lifting the hands in front and then bringing the hands as though they're on top of something and then pushing them down. And again, just not locking them into this thing that's doing this, but feeling like both hands are independent. So they're having to really listen to each other to stay in sync. Yeah, so it's all mind. You know, the more advanced the work becomes, the more it becomes just mind. It's you looking at the mind, just trying to get out of the way and just letting spirit and pure mind just take over. Ooh. Yeah, so we just want to, the mind is normally completely against energy. So when you've got the normal mind operating, there'll be no energy. So we want basically to turn mind into energy, or turn energy into mind. So it's such a different mind. So it's a spirited mind, it's a listening mind. And now keep it going, but now use the up to drive you down into the legs. And then use the down to push yourself up. So just imagine you're in the pool. So if you were to pull your hands up quickly in the pool, it would drive your body down into the bottom of the pool. And then when you push your hands down into the water, it would push your body up. You're just trying your best not to lock the two arms into a single machine. So for that, you need to be making these little micro turns side to side all the time. Okay, now let's just turn the toes out to the corners. And then we can really go down then until the thighs are pretty much parallel to the ground, and then okay, one more. Okay, and now just feeling the equilibrium. Yeah. So I'm being drawn down by my heaviness. So that I want to feel that as like a flow, and I'm being pushed up by my strength, and I also want to feel that as a flow. So these two active forces that are trembling at this equilibrium. So the temptation all the time is to produce a holding force that just holds me still. So I don't want that, because there's no energy there. I want it to, it should start shaking and trembling quite soon if you're relaxing into the equilibrium. Yeah, so now these two flows that we're producing, they should really, just sort of hold each other and stop. Yeah. So they should really just combine to produce a held situation. So I have to keep them separate and keep them going. And that's spirit. Yeah. So spirit just keeps the distance, if you like. It pushes things apart just enough for them to start really resonating against each other. It's not so much, it's very much, I accidentally sort of looked up the word encounter. I always just thought it meant a meeting. Yeah. So you encounter someone, you meet them. But it doesn't. Encounter is to counter something, is to resist, and contra, go against. Yeah. So you encounter the stranger. Yeah. So the stranger's otherness is a resistance to my ego. Yeah? So it's only really when there's that clash, when there's that contra, that sort of like an elastic sort of interaction, that my own otherness is exposed, because my own otherness it's invisible to my own ego. Yeah? So I have to work in such a way that my otherness is being exposed, because it's the best part of me. The worst part of me is my ego. And your otherness only really comes out in response to the otherness in the other. And so they always have to be strangers in a way, because of course you grow familiar with the people that you know, and then you can start abusing them and abusing that relationship. And so it's really, when someone just stops you in the street and just says, "Do you know the way to the shopping mall?" And just something happens, you're so different than when you encounter or meet someone that you know. So spirit is, in a sense, it's like the energy of the encounter. And so everything is, it's like a potential threat, yeah? And so something in you has to be ready to receive it as such. And it just puts you on your guard in the right way. It just brings you to your best. It's the best thing about, for me, living in Israel, everyone is the other. Even the people I know. And that's why, I love the immigrants here, partly because I'm one of them. Like, especially like the illegal immigrants, those that have come from Sudan and from Africa that shouldn't really be here illegally. But because they're prepared to work for a pittance, people sort of tolerate them. And they're just full of spirit because they have to be. They're more like the wild man that's never quite sure. Whereas, the sort of the molar bourgeoisie, they're the ones to me that they're just smug, smug and complacent, ugly. Full of their first world problems, which have nothing to do with life and death. Okay, now let's just turn it now into bow and arrow. So from riding horse, so we'll turn this way. So just turn these toes out. And then just push yourself round. So my back leg is pushing the ground that way to push this hip forwards. And my front leg is pushing the ground that way to push this hip back. So both legs are working. Both legs are active. And I'm just relaxing into it. Again, I just don't want it to sort of tighten up because I want the springiness. They talk about the Tai Chi master, when you put your hand on, they feel like sprung steel. You put your hand, and suddenly you're sort of fired off like an electric shock. It's not from the springiness up and down. It's from the springiness side to side in the waist. So that's what we want to just develop. And so it's a lot of work to maintain this position, because all the time it's just wanting to just drift back into riding horse. So riding horse is stable. I mean, it's hard work, but it's like it doesn't really want to go anywhere. It's quite happy just being here. So when I go into, so turn these toes out now. So when I go into bow and arrow, it's really sprung. Yeah, so both of my legs are involved in countering the relaxation, which is the turn back to the front. And I just need to use my spirit, my intention. I sort of force myself inside to expand, to keep the components just far enough apart for them not to sort of stick onto each other and form a sort of a clotted unity. So it's very much sort of all these pieces are sort of oscillating and shimmering and trembling. And then just let it relax. So you can feel something inside me just goes, ooh, thank God for that. And then I'll turn the other foot out and then, ooh. And now I'm really sprung. Yeah, so the important thing is to be relaxing across here. And just feel the two outside edges, because they're what's pushing into the ground, really. So this knee is working out, and so is this one. And then just relax it back to the front. And then this side. So what I want to feel is the cross energy. So cross energy won't just happen because you pushed your weight into a foot. Yeah, so just because I've moved into this foot, it doesn't mean that I'm going to get energy into this hand. I have to make it happen. And so this foot is trying to push me forwards. And it's like as my body is going forwards, this leg squeezes through that body and into the opposite hand. So this leg is working really hard, not to hold me and stop me falling forwards, but to drive through my body and into the opposite hand. And it just requires a certain, because normally when we sink, we sort of get into this, and this, it really has to sort of wriggle up the spine. So it just requires me not to let my chest collapse down. And this has to really remain open, because any tension across the sacrum, the sacroiliacs, any tension in the hips, and the energy just won't get through. Ooh. And then just let it spring back to the front. And now another one this way, just turning the toes out just a bit. And then again, this is driving me around like this. But this isn't just holding me like it is now. What that is doing is pushing through my body and into this hand. So if there's any sense of me falling into the leg, then the energy won't come through. And then you can just really feel that as like a shoot, like a green shoot coming up the ground. It's growing up my body, finding its path through and coming into the opposite hand. So I really have to open to the ground. I don't just allow the ground to operate upon me. I allow it to come into my body. So I'm becoming porous. This is really important. Otherwise, I'm just a lump. As John would say, a sack of potatoes. So this is coming up here. And then you can also feel this one. This one is coming through here. And the two energies are so different, because this is just more linear and this is really coily, this one. So the front foot energy, so the backhand front foot, it's really spirals. It's beautiful. And then this foot turns it and then just and this is all the way through the form. Yeah. So you can go through the form, you're being really sunken, getting into the legs and everything. And then with that sunkness, you can then do the form, feeling it coming into the opposite hand all the time. Because all the way through the form, it's just cross energy. This is why John could never understand when people didn't work on it, because to him, it was just obvious. Yeah. Yeah, so how do I use the leg in such a way that it actively squeezes this channel through me? Yeah, so it's obviously it's fighting, it's sort of tussling and sort of, it's like this. This is how we want to use the body. So we relax out of the sort of ego stiffness so that the body can really tense up with this sort of elastic fighting tension. And then just back to the front. Okay, so now let's just bring it to riding horse again. So just drawing the belly in. You really have to get a sense of the powerhouse of the belly. The belly's not so much sort of a reservoir. It's not like something that fills up with water. So you shouldn't have this bloated feeling. You should have a feeling almost like there's a vacuum there and it's just sucking in all the time. If it feels bloated, you're either too fat, you've eaten too much, or you're not eating the right stuff. Okay, now let's just try just a little bit of, so just this exercise. So this is basically the same thing. You know, I'm sinking into this foot, but the foot is driving through my body and into this opposite hand. So I just want to really feel the connection between the sole of the foot and the palm of the hand. So this is coming up through me. And then as I come forwards, this leg is driving up into this hand. So we have to see it. We have to be working on mind and get out of habitual action. Yeah, so I want to make sure that I work this time better than I worked last time. I'm a better person for the work that I do. So how relaxed do I have to maintain this body to allow the energy? Don't think of it as energy. Think of it more like a sort of this plant that's just growing up. It has to find a way of leaping across each joint until it manifests in the hand. So it's slow. Yeah, so we need an image. We need something to work with, and then we just let it work on us. So I have this image of the plant growing through me. And then I just let it go. I just let it take control. You know, so you can start seeing the color. You know, what sort of green is it? How does it smell? Does it have tendrils? Does it have leaves? You know, so it's like it's an imaginative reality that just possesses you. It's like an actor, you know, when they sort of get into character really well, then, you know, stuff comes through that character that they're not putting there. You know, so the character sort of takes on a life of its own. And then when they see themselves played back on video, they're as surprised as everyone else by what came out. It's sort of tapping into the unconscious, really. So any creative person, that's what they're after. Okay. So who? Jasper Johns, yeah, he said, when I work, so in other words, when he paints, he says, I want to be able to just look at that painting and say, that's not me. I didn't do that. Something came through me. Yeah. Like Jack Spicer, the poet, he used to say that basically his poems were dictated to him. He used to say by Martians. He was a bit mad. So it's not coming from the conscious mind. So the conscious mind will always maintain the status quo and will always hold you back. It will always hold your imagination back. It holds reality at bay and institutes a world, a manageable world. So that's what we're just trying to just get away from. Yeah, so when Taoism was sort of being formalized by Lao Tzu and his cohorts, there are basically two sort of philosophical movements, Taoism and Confucianism. Yeah. So Confucianism is what I would call bourgeois. Yeah. So it's Confucianism aims to make the world a better place, whereas Taoism aims to destroy the world in order to reveal reality. So completely different aims. So in a sense, Taoism is just about getting back to nature. It's getting back to how we were before we became domesticated creatures, before we became shitless and spiritless. Ooh. Coming through me. Ooh. Now, and people say to me all the time, why? Why should we work on this? And I think it just depends upon your experiences, really. If you've had experiences of spirit, pure experiences of spirit, then you won't want anything else because it's so much more real than the world we know. But what normally gives you those experiences of spirit is danger or abuse. So with me having an abusive father, it seemed like a terrible thing at the time. But when I look back on it, all my experiences of spirit were generally through that. Yeah. So when something inside you has to rise to save your life, that spirit to save the day. And it doesn't have to be sort of dramatic. It can just be like, you have something to do that's onerous and you don't want to do. Onerous and odious, yeah. And so what is it inside you that just comes up and turns it into something that's you're really grateful for? Turns it into something amazing. Okay, so let's just... So for me, this work with spirit, it's a healthy response to post-traumatic stress syndrome. So if you've had difficult experiences that have forced your spirit to come up, turn you into a different creature and save the day, then obviously you're going to be stressed afterwards. You're going to feel down afterwards, because this is just doesn't compare. Yeah. And so we just need a way of working on it. Just a little, keeping spirit alive. It's what John called faith. So instead of trying to heal you, instead of trying to make you like everyone else with the same aspirations as everyone else, we're doing the opposite. We're keeping the wound open so that we can maintain that bleeding and just keep that trembly aliveness. Okay, now let's just try just stepping. So just sinking down into the foot. So again, my little toes extend in order to grab into the ground, and then I go down into the outside edge, and it's that enables this foot to come up. So I'm cutting under, I'm creating a circuit of which my other leg, the rising leg, is the other side. So one part of my body is going down and the other part is coming up. And then I just step with that. And again, just really reaching with the little toes. And then the little toes grab so that my outside edge can go into the ground in order to bring this foot up. So it should just feel really light, really delicate, and really alive. Ooh. So 1. And ooh. So this is just pure spirit. Ooh. Yeah, so what your meditation gives you is a familiarity with the ground. And this is what we want to feel, so that even though it hurts the legs and it's a strain, there's part of me that's just, oh, it just wants to touch the ground. It just wants to get down there. Yeah, so this hand is really being tugged down. Yeah. So the earth wants me. It's sending up these shoots to grab me and pull me down into it. So an image of gravity that is just really organic and lively, not this sort of dead mechanical thing. Ooh. Yeah, so all of this stuff came out in Blakeney. I mean, there's so much coming out. And it's like John just didn't have the patience to to really look at each one. So all this material came tumbling out. And he always used to say, just one of these insights could keep a master going for the whole lifetime. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so I'm porous. The earth can get into my body and pull. Each part is being pulled down in a slightly different way. So it feels to me when I get into it like I'm slowly occupying a smaller and smaller volume. I'm becoming really sort of crouched into this spherical space. And it's like a whirling space. It's sort of doing this. As I come into this foot, this is set up. So when I'm in position here, I want to feel that. Again, it's in equilibrium. It's still moving. It's moving, 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 moving. And then I just reverse it as I extend the foot out. So its liveliness manifests in the different flows and forces being able to operate in the same space without combining and cancelling each other out. So they want to cancel each other out. They want to just, one wants to just settle against the other. But I just keep it slippery. I keep the surfaces slippery. So this is the thing, as we get older, we get stiff, we get dry, and we get sticky. So we want to be flexible, fluid, juicy, and slippery. Ooh. Okay, one more. Ooh. Okay, and now let's just bring it to riding horse. Again, your belly, your down chin is like a black hole. So it's sucking everything in. So it's that makes you cohere. So they've found now that every galaxy in the cosmos has a supermassive black hole as its center. So each galaxy is basically slowly being sucked in to the black hole. So this is why the galaxies stay as, they don't just drift off forever and disperse. Yeah. So there has to be a force that is sort of countering entropy, countering the tendency to just dissipate and just, what they call a heat death. So here, something here is just pulling in. Okay, so now let's just bring it up. Yeah, so the work should really make the legs tremble and shake, and just destabilizing anything that is stable, really. Basically just trying to bring movement into everything. So what the ego wants, what your self-consciousness wants, is for your body to sort of stabilize and become still so that it can start moving, so it can start thinking about something else. So one way of countering the ego is just to make sure that everything is in equilibrium, everything has this sort of tremble. The system is threatening to fall apart. And so you really have to listen and equilibrate. You're constantly bringing things back into balance. And that's basically the Taoist mind. And that's our spirit in a way. Our spirit is not so much the spirit that explodes and kills people. And that just has limited value, limited appeal. It's much more the spirit that's sort of just it's making these little micro adjustments all the time. So it's what John would call feminine spirit. Okay, right.